Can technology, that is in this case, can the internet help human rights? The answer's got to be yes. As well, I'm sure, as it can hurt human rights. But human rights' strength is that it's a deduction. It's a deductive argument that grows out of a recognition of what all humans have in common. We have certain interests as biological creatures, just a fact, and so we have rights to have those interests looked after based upon our biology. We have certain interests as creatures who have interests, who care about what happens to them, that want to flourish, and so we have a set of rights associated with that as well. And the deductive power of human rights is immensely powerful, because it means you don't have to rely upon sort of ginning up a feeling of sympathy for cute little children with big eyes, because human rights applies to all humans, whether they're adorable children or they're gnarly, crusty, repulsive old men. It doesn't matter. We all have human rights. Incredibly powerful, and a big step forward for civilization when we realize this. Well, the fact that we have interests, both as biological creatures and as creatures who have interests, I think, and not just me, but I think gives rise to morality itself. So if you fail to understand that we live in a shared world, that there are other creatures, and that just as what happens to you and your world matters to you, it matters to them too. And it matters differently to them. If you don't understand that most basic thing, then you are not moral. You are a moral monster. You're a psychopath or some sociopath. It's the most basic requirement for morality, is that you recognize that it's a shared world with other people whose world matters to them just as it matters to you, but it matters differently to them. So Richard Rorty, the late American philosopher, said something roughly like this. I'm just not putting it very well. And he said that's why over the course of time in the West, the moral discussion has moved from a discussion of God and faith, that God gives us our moral principles, to philosophy and reason, that's where we get our morality, to, in the modern age, to novels. That's where moral reasoning is occurring, because in novels we get to see and to feel how the world matters to other people. It's fiction, but it exposes moral questions in that sense. And that's where the heft, he says, of moral thinking is in the past couple centuries, which I think is just beautiful insight and quite wonderful and correct. And I would extend it just a little bit. If that's the case for novels, then I think it's also the case for the internet. Now, let me be clear. Lots and lots of terrible things happen on the internet and always will. I'm not sure how much we can blame the internet for that any more than we can give credit to the internet for the good that happens there. There will be no end of horrors on the internet. Nevertheless, the internet has a basic architecture that mirrors that of morality itself. The internet is based around links and connections. The web is in some ways the fulfillment of the internet in that regard. And the basic idea behind linking is that I point to you because I want my readers to see how the world matters to you. Right? The basic structure of linking is the same as the structure of morality. We live in a shared world. There are other people in it. The world matters to them. It matters to them differently. And now it's incredibly easy for me to link to you and you to link to me. And so we can see much of the moral work that's going on in novels. We can see that occurring in people's lives through the internet. It doesn't mean that the internet brings peace. It just means that it has a moral nature that we can use or not, just as we have moral natures, and we can choose to pursue moral interests or not. It's not enough for the technology. For example, as my friend and mentor Ethan Zuckerman says, we need bridge figures, because it can be so difficult to understand how the world matters to someone else. because cultures can be so different and interests can be so different that we need bridge figures who can translate and help us to see, to read the novel that is somebody else's life, so to speak. So this is not something that happens automatically. It requires vigilance, continual vigilance, and will and technology to accomplish the moral possibilities that the net brings to us. This means that the net can supplement in a very important way the deduction that is human rights. That deduction remains in place, remains incredibly powerful. It's a moral fact that we cannot turn away from, except at the price of losing our own morality. Nevertheless, human rights as a deduction, extremely important. The internet can supplement that with something else that's also very important. Because as a deduction, it gets its power from the fact that, from what we all have in common, that we are human, that we have biological interests and we have interests in our interests. It comes from what we all have in common. Novels and the internet, as interpreted through other people's sites and through bridge figures and all the rest, is about often let's just see the individual. How the differences in how, not the sameness of the fact that we are interested, but the differences in how we are interested in our world and how our world matters to us. And this can provide some of the outrage, some of the connection, some of the love that is based upon the particular. This is something that we need not just politically, although politically, yes, we are moved by the particularities of how the world matters to others. It's not simply, however, the fact that this is good political motivation to get us to actually do something. It is also just as much of a fact as the fact that we are all human, thus have certain rights. That is a fact. It is also a fact that those rights, which are about protecting our interests, are about interests that are always, always particular. And so I believe that the internet, in fact, can very much help human rights.